The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards the
most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. Kia ora tato, this is Gone By Lunchtime. It's been a little while, listeners, but we've eventually managed to track down Annabelle Lee, who ghosted Ben Thomas and I for a while. What was going on, Annabelle?
It's really hard to walk through your front door and then up 4 flights of stairs with a baby, so right. I've just been avoiding you.
Okay. We're moving offices.
I can't wait.
Will you be more available then?
I'll be potting like 3 times a day when you move offices.
This has Gone By Lunchtime. Ben Thomas is here. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Toby.
Alice is producing. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
She says hi.
I haven't been avoiding you. I've been in Wellington.
Oh no, you were easy to get hold of.
Because you're always on Twitter.
I went to the National Party caucus party.
Oh, you went to the
about a week ago.
The piss up.
Good news, they had music.
I forgot.
Well, now that they're not in government, they've got time.
Oh, I see.
They turned on the stereo. That's a callback.
See what's going on.
Callback to social media.
You can't call back to a different platform,
can't you?
No.
Aren't we all just? We're all just the singularity.
You've just reminded me, I forgot to RSVP to that. I was kindly invited but wasn't able to make it. I feel bad. I'll have to send a belated one today.
I was invited too.
You were? Did you go?
I didn't go.
Did you remember to RSVP? I'll send an apology for you too.
They stressed that there was to be no reporting on this event, so that everybody could get drunk and gossip in the privacy of their own company. How was the gossip, Ben?
I'm just here to talk about the music. No, it's fine. National, they're in high spirits. I think generally they've adapted a lot better than I expected to opposition.
Oh.
Because I guess there was a situation that they're a huge opposition, but they were a large government party as well. So there were a lot of backbenchers who really didn't have a lot to do in government. Now they all have portfolios. Simon Bridges has actually kind of stretched it quite thin to give everyone a portfolio. So I think Lawrence Yule, one of the newcomers, is the spokesperson for viticulture, which but even he is making moves on issues like kiwi fruit growers. So every opposition, much more so than government, is really what you make it. You can kind of plough into something and kind of dig in and make it an issue. So I think Melissa Lee is somebody, for instance, Mark and Claire Curran, who didn't have a particularly distinguished backbencher career in government, but is doing great things in opposition. So, high spirits. Everyone's getting on with the job. My old boss, Chris Finlayson, had just had his bill to reform the law of contempt, a private member's bill, vote passed its first reading, and I think Andrew Little, the Justice Minister, has indicated that he'll adopt that bill as government policy, subject to cabinet approval, and it just sort of shows, there was a lot of sort of consternation and huffing between both partisan sides, I think, and about with the opposition from hell and National being an obstructive opposition, but actually a lot of these former ministers are getting down and just doing sort of constructive bipartisan work in Parliament.
Oh, that sounds lovely.
It's a good vibe.
Beautiful. That sounds beautiful. Can I just say that that would be the ideal portfolio, wouldn't it? Like Minister of Viticulture and Confectionery.
Yeah. Superannuation and viticulture. Just take the Waiheke ferry for free over to some vineyards.
You're just calling back like crazy to all the online activity, Ben Thomas.
Duncan Grieve of The Spin-Off did a fantastic piece this week about the horrible scam, the absolute fucking rort, which is the Waiheke ferry subsidy thanks to Winston Peters' gold card. And just the huge cost that this tiny minority of rich Waiheke dwellers and disinterested greying day trippers costs the country.
So they can. You would prefer they were not able to go and visit their family or volunteer at the city mission?
No, those people are literally using their gold card to commute to the city.
Yeah, that's what the story was about. Speaking of Chris Finlayson, did he tell you how soon he's going to resign at this off-the-record event?
Not something I discussed with him. I've seen reports in the media that he has a lot of work still to do.
Okay, just tidying up a few. So, what? Longer than a year? Less than a year until he resigns?
I wouldn't like to guess.
Okay.
Who's the next cab off the rank, do you think?
Well, Nick Smith's got an electorate, hasn't he? That's the difficulty.
I think there'll be I think there's actually going to be a lot of pressure because I can't remember who's next on the National Party list to come in, after there's the next list resignation. But the person after that is National's New Lynn candidate, who I think believes that even intramarital sex is a sin if it's not for the purposes of procreation. Like and so I suspect there'll be quite a lot of pressure on whoever the next one after this one to resign is to just stay put for a while.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Well, that sounds like something that you learned over a DB at the National. What were they serving?
I learned that by reading suburban newspapers, actually. Yeah. Good coverage out west.
We also should introduce Waimihia Rose, who is, as always, our fourth and most highly acclaimed podcaster. There she is. Speaks for all of us. Waimihia, another callback here, like the rest of us, is fabriqué en Nouvelle-Zélande. Chris Finlayson, since you brought him up, is it true, what I read about him, that he has a moonlighting career as a hip-hop artist in the Hutt Valley? Or was it the Wairarapa?
Yeah, now that was an unproven political rumour circulated about the then Attorney General and Minister of the Arts that appeared in, I think, the Wairarapa News. They were doing some press for his visit and said that he's a man of many talents, that he liked Shakespeare and had been on the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra board, but also that he rapped. And we never got to the bottom of where that particular perhaps salacious political rumour came from. I never saw him to be frank engaging in any of the four elements.
Has he actively denied that, though? Does he sort of explicitly denied rapping?
There's never been any look. You don't dignify these things with responses.
He would probably, if he were to rap, he would probably say, "Now I'm going to do a bit of Aeschylus," or something like that, wouldn't he? That'd be,
is iambic pentameter rap?
Yes. Anyways, so that was a neat segue onto gossip, which dominated a bit of the, I suppose, a lot of the political spotlight over recent weeks while we've been away. And that was, of course, the story that Clark Gayford had.
I also heard he...
And then he had also, of course...
But the worst one was that...
But the point has been none of that was true, was it?
No, the Police Commissioner, Mike Bush, took the unusual step of putting out a statement globally debunking what we've just talked about. And then the New Zealand Herald took the equally, I think, unusual step of running a story about how they had thoroughly investigated the rumours and determined that they weren't true. Now, I mean, I think quite a few other media sources might be feeling a bit peeved about that because I think they had also all investigated the rumours, confirmed that they weren't true, and based on that, not published anything, as is usual practice with the news.
Yes.
So, I mean, there was a bit of a sort of a sense that the Herald was kind of just really stretching to kind of get this into the paper somehow.
Yes, all that was true. It didn't. I mean, the argument that was made, as far as I could tell, was that it was in the public interest because the rumours had reached such a level, an unprecedented level in terms of the number of people that were talking about them, that it was doing a service. And then there was sort of further kind of conjecture about whether or not this was something that was engineered by the Prime Minister's department as a way of dealing with the situation and blah, blah, blah. I mean, do you have any
No,
view on that, Annabelle?
No, but it's really interesting when you see the way those rumours are planted, like when Deborah Cohn-Hill
Yes.
did her article, and you see those accounts on Twitter that were commenting on it, and they were saying just little kind of comments like, wow, you can see she really knows all about the case, or
This is the article where she said, I don't like the cut of his jib.
yeah, or this article is amazing when you know about the case, or those sorts of things. And you go onto those Twitter accounts, and you know they're sort of followed by 20 people, and they follow 200 people, and they're dodgy names. But it's quite there's an art to seeding those sorts of rumours, isn't there?
No, I don't believe that idea that this was somehow a conspiracy of, you know, a group of determined rumour mongers. These sorts of rumours, you know, the ones that end up with everyone knowing but never being published, they're perpetual. I remember the day that I first became a political insider. I was I think a second year student at the University of Auckland, and one of my deep sources, someone I met in the quad, confided in me that a prominent public figure had been caught on videotape in a compromising position in central Auckland, and I felt a great weight of responsibility knowing this information, and so promptly told about 1 million people over the next year or so, because, you know, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're an insider, like you know something that other people don't. It's never true. None of this stuff is true. But it just kind of it spreads quite naturally. You know, there were similar rumours about Helen Clark's husband. You know, and it really is just these sort of disparate streams that all come together. You know, these tributaries flowing into just this giant flooded Yangtze of gossip, when all of these things sort of butt up against each other and then kind of make a consensus by default. I think it's wrong to sort of look at these Twitter accounts that have 20 followers and they're all just following each other, and somehow think that, you know, from these, you know, they're basically blog commenters who have now got Twitter accounts, that somehow they communicated to your girlfriend's flatmate's sister's hairdresser, you know, some rumour about the Prime Minister's husband. You know, there's just not that kind of reach. You know, there is gossip and there's rumours in every industry, politics, entertainment. You know, we have a power couple at the head of the country. We have people from the entertainment industry, Clark Gayford, someone from politics, Jacinda Ardern. So you probably do get super rumours.
I disagree. I think they are absolutely purposely seeded, and then they snowball, and, you know, that's how your cousin's friend's flatmate ends up finding out about them. They grow legs. But I do think that they start with intent and then don't necessarily spread by intent, but I do think that they're, you know, that there's definitely purposely seeded.
The funny thing, that we noticed on the website, the spinoff.co.nz, is that there was a massive appetite for these stories first up, you know, just out of basic curiosity, but quite quickly that fell away and people were just sick of it, like, stop, we're just sick of this bullshit. And so whether or not it's something that was sought or even supported by the Prime Minister's office, in a way it kind of turned out okay for them, I think. Insofar as I mean, my sense is that people aren't that interested anymore. I mean, like, people were talking about it furiously, it seemed to me, for 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, and now it's like, oh, next. I don't know, what do you think, Alice? Alice doesn't care. But is it something that people are discussing among your friends? No.
I have to say, it was discussed in our office. We had people coming in saying, hey, have you heard those rumours? Because I got it from a really good source, and
right.
blah, blah, blah. So it was interesting from a media perspective to see that journalists were actually genuinely curious as to whether or not they were true, which goes to show how, I guess, dangerous those sorts of rumours can be.
Yeah, that's right. And look, we should never lose sight of, it's kind of, I used to tell the story about, the fake rumour I heard. It's, a kind of self-deprecating anecdote about, sort of the vanity of thinking that you're some kind of insider or that you're passing on secret knowledge. It's sort of a funny story. And then, many years later, I heard from a person, an actual reliable source who knew the person in question, who said that they came close to suicide over the rumours. Yeah. So, the best response to all of these things is the one that I give people, and I've given it a lot over the past couple of months when people say, oh, you heard these rumours, I've got a big scoop for you. Can you, which is that it's not true, it's never true. Try and forget about it.
Yeah.
Was that, did you give that line to Hooton, or did he give it to you? Because it's exactly what Hooton said in his column.
Yeah, no,
you think together.
His line is the video never arrives, because he's thinking of a particular case. But no, I think most people, when you've worked around politics for any protected period of time, you realise these things just never turn out to be true. When I first got down to Wellington, we were just bombarded.
Sorry, that was me thumping the microphone going through.
We would be bombarded by these rumours that everyone knew were true, like a male national MP who had left his wife for his male executive assistant. And when you ask around, you see this guy's never had a male staff member.
Yeah.
Right? But everyone just knew this was the case. Or a politician who was seen through the window in flagrante, and then you see where his office is, and it doesn't have any external windows. There's just no basis to these things, but they just sort of spontaneously occur. They get reinforced by.
They affect both sides of the house too. It's not just Labor that gets them. It's the Nats have been on the end of a fair share of them as well.
Should we crack on from the gossip? Just to reiterate that the story that wasn't true was that Clark Gayford in select committee in recent weeks has been it's something to do with the election integrity
electoral integrity.
But everyone calls it the waka jumping bill, which is a much more memorable name, and it in essence would require that if you attempted to leave a political party while in Parliament or go to a different party, that you would have to resign your seat.
Or if you're de facto been seen to leave the party. So if the leader determines that wants to expel you from the caucus, and has the support, I think it's of 2/3 of the caucus, then he notifies the speaker that there's a vacancy, and you will leave Parliament, and there'll either be a by-election or a new person off the list if you're a list MP. It's more descriptive name would be the ensuring Winston makes it intact with his party to the next election bill. We've had this legislation before, which Winston Peters insisted on in 1999. The Alliance insisted on in 1999 after their experience of losing Alamein Kopu to the national government in the previous term. Winston Peters lost about sort of half of his caucus in 1996 to the national government. They just peeled off and went as a bloc. And so Winston Peters probably, I think, has fallen out with more members of his caucus than any other party leader in history. And so this is just a personal crusade to ensure that, one, he controls who the New Zealand First MPs are, and two, that his party makes it intact with the full number of seats to the next election.
I Obviously, it is in Winston's best interest to get this bill passed, but to be fair, this is an issue that has affected other minor parties, and it's easy for National and others to criticise it because it's not really something that's a big problem for them, but it is a big deal for minor parties. So I understand why there is a need for legislation. I don't know if this is, well, obviously experts say that this is not the right way to go about it, but I do think that there needs to be something there, because when you're a minor party, to lose an MP is a big deal, you know, especially when you were a little party like Mana Motuhake, and who within the alliance, when they lost Alamein Kopu, you know, that was a massive setback for them. So I do understand why there is a desire on behalf of smaller parties to put some legislation in place around it.
There's a lot of pressure on the Greens, especially because this is part of the coalition deal that was signed between Labour and New Zealand First, which, the Greens tacitly went along with all the parts of that agreement, and so the Greens have certainly voted it through its first reading. But a lot of people within the Greens have some disquiet about it. Maybe not. Maybe some of them seem more relaxed about it. But you've got former Green MPs coming out. Jeanette Fitzsimons was very strong in terms of saying that this bill basically attempts to smother dissent, and dissent is an essential part of parliamentary democracy. Sue Bradford was similarly vocal, and it is a problem for the Greens potentially if they're seen to be doing something expedient. They're in a bind because if the nature of the government is such that if they were to withhold their support, the bill couldn't go through, and then who knows what Winston would do, right? I mean, that's the that's the real politic of it, right?
I think, you know, like if it is about dissent, well, if you're an electorate MP and you really strongly disagree with your party, then you should quit and allow the electorate to decide if you're on the wrong side or the right side of whatever the issue may be. And if you're a list MP, then you are there because of your party. So I think perhaps that's the issue, is that I do think that this is a case where, or an area where list MPs should be treated differently from electorate MPs, because if you're on the list, you got there through party vote, and presumably the desire of voters is that the party is represented, not the person. So in that case, I do think that people should be able to be kicked out of Parliament if they are no longer towing the party line. And they can stand again at the next election. And if you're an electorate MP, then you should put your money where your mouth is and resign and let the electorate decide.
Other kind of potential fault lines within the government, sort of three-part government, have started to emerge, and as they inevitably will. And one of them that in recent weeks has been compulsory te reo in school, and Winston
compulsion versus universal availability.
Yeah. So is that likely to be? I mean, that was Nanai Mahuta, I think, speaking out, and Winston. What happened?
Winston gave her a crack because I believe Nanaya was asked. So the government's policy is about universal availability of te reo Māori, which quite simply means that, at the moment I drive my kids to Newton to learn te reo Māori, and my older children I had to drive all the way out to Glen Eden to Huane Waititi. And with the universal availability, it means that the school down the road will have to provide te reo Māori if my children want to learn it at that school, whereas compulsion means that it becomes a part of the curriculum that all children have to learn. I think it's interesting, this issue, because Winston having a crack at Nanaya and sort of being backed up by Jacinda, because I think it shows the chasm between the expectations of Labour's Māori MPs versus what they might actually get. And I don't know if it's just a strategy because they don't want to, that, perhaps Labour does intend for it to be compulsory eventually, but they don't want to say the C word and scare off voters, or if there is genuinely no desire on behalf of the rest of Labour to have compulsory te reo Māori within the curriculum. But the other thing that I think is interesting, and it's happened a couple of times now, is saying party leaders crack MPs that aren't their own. So a while back we saw Jacinda cracking Shane Jones over the Air New Zealand stuff, and then recently we've seen Winston having a crack at Willie Jackson and Nanaya over this te reo Māori stuff. And to me, it's not a good look when party leaders are cracking MPs that aren't their own. I think they should be saying, especially when you're, in a slightly controversial coalition government already, where people are saying it's all very tenuous and it's going to fall apart. I think you should just say, well, that MP is entitled to their opinions, but that's certainly not our policy, rather than actually coming out and cracking them. I just don't think it sends the right perception, it creates a perception that things are a bit more unstable than what you would expect this early in.
I mean, the other way of looking at it is that because these are all cabinet ministers or ministers outside cabinet in a formal coalition between New Zealand First and Labour, it actually is more appropriate that the Deputy Prime Minister can sort of shoot down something that one of his lower ranked ministers says, or that the Prime Minister would take Shane Jones to task, than that they leave it on a sort of per party kind of delegation to sort of keep their members of cabinet in line. We saw, for instance, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister, wouldn't reprimand Jenny Marcroft, who was that New Zealand First MP, the backbencher, who sort of implicitly threatened Mark Mitchell, about sort of provincial regional growth funding or whatever, because she wasn't part of the Prime Minister's caucus. Whereas Shane Jones is one of her ministers, Nanaya Mahuta is one of Winston Peters' ministers as Deputy Prime Minister. I don't know. I mean, this is also... I
would have thought that you'd leave it to the Deputy Leader in that case, like a Calvin Davis, to, on that issue, call them out. But I hear what you're saying.
I mean, the other thing is it's probably a bit of a false debate right now. I think when people like Nanaya and Willie say that we will have compulsory te reo, I mean, in the same way as people often talk about becoming a republic. They say it will happen. We don't have a timeline for it, but it will happen. I think it'll happen before we become a republic. And universal availability, I think, would be a necessary stepping stone to that, because while you build up the capacity, there are nowhere near enough te reo teachers right now.
That's definitely step one.
And I think it goes well beyond the time frame of the next 2.5 years, which is where this kind of cycle and sidecar sort of government sort of creaks and rickets across like the around a mountain ravine or whatever towards the next election.
And it's interesting that you say that, Ben, because I think most Māori who care about te reo would not believe that at all. They think that we think that it's something that should be happening very soon, and we wouldn't consider it in the same vein of as a republic or changing the flag. We would expect that it would be something that the government could deliver, if not towards the end of this term, then perhaps the second term. And so again, I think it shows that the gap between expectation versus perhaps reality.
Switching subjects slightly to one of the great kind of narratives of this government is working on infrastructure and transport and housing, and there we've had the green light for the fuel tax to try and fund the expansion in Auckland's transport requirements under ATAP, which is the 10-year plan. Fuel tax, is that the right mechanism? Is that okay? Is that contradicting the claim that there won't be more taxes?
I don't. It's not a contradiction. No, I think raising the fuel excise tax is not a contradiction of the idea that there will be no new taxes in this term. just as I don't think collecting GST on overseas online purchases, that's not a new tax either. Excise tax does always go up. Allowing the Auckland Council to have a regional fuel tax, that's slightly different, I think. You might get away on a technicality with that. The problem with the fuel tax is that it hits poorer people the most. Poorer people live further out in Auckland, they commute the furthest, they have to drive the longest distances, they work hours where you can't take public transport. If you're a cleaner coming in from South Auckland to clean Sky City, you can't just hop on the light rail because, one, it doesn't exist yet, and two, it won't be running at midnight, right? Midnight to sort of 4 a.m. on a weekday. So it hurts poor people in the medium term. I would have thought that funding along the idea of value capture along these new transport links, where you capture some of the increase in a property's value, would have been a better way to do these things. I think Phil Twyford's still looking at that, because there you're just taxing windfall gains from property owners who are already the richest people in Auckland, not the poorest.
I completely agree, Ben, and I think taking it through rates would be a far more equitable way of raising that capital, rather than the whole user pays system. It seems like it's always user pays when it comes to poor people, but when it comes to cleaning up rivers and farmers and that sort of thing, that whole philosophy gets thrown out the window. The other thing about it too is how the regions are concerned about, the cost is going to get spread to them, and how can it be assured that they won't end up paying for New Zealand's roads. On that one, I would say actually the rest of New Zealand benefits economically when Auckland is running efficiently. And, Auckland pays, or taxes raised in Auckland help subsidise other projects around the country. So I don't think that should be a big issue. The other possibility is, why can't we just charge petrol companies an extra tax that they can't pass on to consumers? I mean, we've had that story recently about how they're rorting, the regions and with their prices. So perhaps some of the cost should be pushed onto them.
That was pretty clear. It was just about who they were providing bigger discounts to. It was just about who gets a better discount. There was no rorting. Let's be very clear about that. Running out of time. Quickly on the we'll talk about the Māori role next time, maybe, and whether or not that there's the risk of losing one of the Māori seats if people continue to vote as they are, or switch as they are during this period. There's a budget next week. We're talking on Friday morning. There's the 11th of May? Yeah. And there's a budget next Thursday. And I don't know, it's hard to read. Is it one of those kind of slightly Cullen-esque budgets that is where you do that kind of prep? Like that kind of psychological game where you prepare yourself, or in this case the country, for feeling like something is going to be dreadful, and then it's actually quite good, and so you've downplayed expectations and everyone is happy. And
let me say this, Toby, I'll be keeping a very close eye on what goes into vote confectionery and vote viticulture, and whether in fact it's new money or just recycled.
Yeah. Have you got anything? Do you want to disclose anything? Have you got any commercial relationships with confectionery or viticulture?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what you do before a budget. You always talk about just how tough things are, how you're not going to spend any money because you're an extremely responsible fiscal manager. This is really important for Grant Robertson in particular, who doesn't have a finance or an economics background, sort of thrust into this role after only about sort of 3 years kind of getting to grips with it in opposition. He feels he really has to assure people that he's a sound manager of the books, as they say. So he's talking about how there won't be any big spend up, there won't be a lolly scramble, to use all of the terminology that I think the spin-off helpfully compiled in a piece this week. And then on budget day, you actually spend shitloads of money and everyone is pleasantly surprised, but they've already internalised the idea that you're a fiscally responsible manager, and so they think that whatever you've done is inherently affordable and responsible. but good, and you've pulled off some sort of magic trick. Most famously, the Key government did this in 2009, 2010, where they said we're going to have fiscally neutral tax cuts. We're probably going to raise GST a bit and lower income taxes, and it's all going to be fiscally neutral and responsible. In the end, it actually cost about $1 billion extra a year, but people had already figured it, people had already internalized the message that it was fiscally neutral, and so they managed to hit both those notes. They're responsible, and also they're giving you lots of money. There won't be income tax cuts this year, but there will probably be lots and lots of spending on infrastructure.
Let's wind this up, because When We Hear Rose is just about enough. Very quickly before we sign off, Ben, I'm keen to hear whether or not you are still working at all for David Seymour as he develops his career on the dance floor.
Only as the cha-cha coach.
Have you been offering any advice?
As per my excruciating and level of disclosure that I always offer spin-off listeners, no, we did some work for ACT during the election campaign for a couple of months last year, and haven't had a commercial relationship since. I voted for him for the first week on on Dancing with the Stars. I didn't watch it.
Okay, but we can now say Ben Thomas voted for David Seymour.
I watched the first 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes. I can't stand it. I thought that it might be a substitute for The Bachelor this year, but just a terrible show.
I'm quite into it. Yeah. I do think that at some point, given it's a dancing show, that if David Seymour gets voted off, he can just grab literally onto the coattails of another dancer and remain in the competition. I'm pretty sure there's I've been working on that gag for a while.
It's really good.
Thanks. You couldn't hear that because Annabelle's off mic, but what she was saying was that was an excellent joke. We had a round of 6 months columns and assessments recently because the Ardern-led government had hit the half-year mark. Can we have a quick round the table on how they've gone, and maybe, I don't know, mark out of 100?
Wait, are we grading the columns or the...
No, I was thinking more the government.
Too meta.
But if you want to grade the columns, feel free.
Yeah, look, I mean, they started off well. People always bank gains, right? In those 6 month reviews, people were sort of saying, well, there won't be much in the budget for child poverty, forgetting that, there was sort of a $1 billion families package announced in December. The public is always sort of like, well, what have you done for us recently? They've done well. They haven't collapsed. Probably down from a 9 out of 10 in their first sort of 4 months to probably a 7, like the Prime Minister said.
7 out of 100.
Oh wait, sorry.
That's harsh.
No, let's call it. Okay, let's.
Ben Thomas voted for David Seymour and has given Jacinda Ardern's government 7 out of 100.
I am going to vote for Phil Twyford on the latest series of The Block NZ. When he tries to convert a Kingsland duplex into 4,000 affordable homes by season's end.
You've been working on that one too, haven't you?
I just remembered it now. I made the joke to my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, and she didn't like. Let's just cut it. Let's cut it in post.
It's not going anywhere. Annabelle, 6 months and a bit.
Everything Ben said.
You have to go close to the microphone.
Everything Ben said, but extra points for the kahu that she wore.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even get into that. Meeting the Queen.
This
podcast is
a
disgrace.
She looked like a Disney princess. It's an amazing photo.
Yeah.
It was an amazing photo.
It's just, iconic.
Let's go out. A shout out to the other spin-off stable of podcasts who can be found at thespinoff.co.nz/podcast. You've got your Real Pod there, where they talk about in more detail David Seymour and his efforts on the dance floor of the nation. And On the Rag, which is the women's podcast, which is very good. And there's the Business is Boring one, which is now at 100 podcasts. Are there any more, Alice? Is that it? Oh, there's music podcasts. That's very good. There are other ones too, apparently. I'm going to check it out. Why don't you too, listeners? This has been Gone By Lunchtime.
Do you find it hard staying optimistic with all the financial news in the media? I'm Bernard Hickey, and on my podcast, When the Facts Change, I'm here to help you navigate the ever-changing landscape of economics in Aotearoa. So join the conversation every Friday on When the Facts Change, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with KiwiBet.
Are you curious about how business can be better? I'm Simon Pound, and I host Business is Boring, a podcast where I caught it all with some of the most interesting people in entrepreneurship, commerce, and making things happen. Tune in to Business is Boring every Tuesday, brought to you by the Spin-Off Podcast Network in partnership with Spark Business Lab. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.